Americans used to rely on animal power for transportation and to carry goods from place to place, and oil from whales to light our evenings. Today, it's gasoline and motor vehicles, and vast amounts of electricity to light our cities and power our economy. But one study claims that Americans spend just 6 minutes a year focusing on energy.
The American public does not like to think about its energy use. The one place Americans do think about energy use is when they're standing at the pump.
Global demand makes oil prices rise and fall in response to events beyond our borders and out of our control.
We worry about how our economy gets buffeted, and the only way we do something about that is to take into our own hands our destiny.
In this program, we look at how America uses energy. And we'll meet people like you who are helping their communities find new sustainable resources and save energy.
Conservation, energy efficiency has already been something that the U.S. has had tremendous achievement in, and it is something as the fifth fuel that can be very, very important for our future.
Tapping that fifth fuel can be as challenging as drilling for oil or gas. But powering communities in these new ways also empowers people.
We can control the things that go on in our homes. We can control the things that go on in our communities.
I'm a Republican. What is more conservative than harnessing what is available and around us in a long-term sustainable way?
Our program's host, earth scientist Richard Alley, knows the dangers of climate change. But he also teaches about energy at Penn State. And he's optimistic that Americans can build a sustainable future. Some states and cities are rolling up their sleeves and moving ahead. These citizens are heroes of America's new energy story and show the way to a sustainable energy future.
The good news is we don't have to wait for the national policies.
Helping ourselves with clean energy is also helping Earth's climate.
The atmosphere doesn't care one whit what people think. The atmosphere cares what people do.
We visit 5 very different communities, from Alaska to Texas, Portland to Baltimore, plus Kansas in America's heartland, to find out how they're developing new sources of energy or cutting waste, and why strategies like those make sense for all of us. Sometimes when Americans hear energy, the next word that comes to mind is crisis. It really doesn't have to be that way. Shirley Jackson, former head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and now president of one of America's leading technical universities, thinks the United States is actually well placed.
Well, the U.S. is lucky because we have such a diversity of climates and diversity of geologies, and in the end, diversity of actual energy sources. And that, in fact, makes us very fortunate. Compared to other parts of the world, they may have a given source of energy, but they don't have the multiple sources.
Alaska, like the rest of America, has been addicted to oil. Now, can abundant, sustainable options make it America's renewable state? Kodiak Island, Alaska, at 3,600 square miles, is about half the size of New Jersey. Getting around almost always involves a boat, or a plane, or a float plane. That's a bit of both. Kodiak's population is less than 14,000, leaving most of the island undeveloped and natural. That beauty is one of Kodiak's economic assets, bringing tourists to watch bears, raising cubs, and catching fish. Kodiak's human population also catches salmon, with fish exports providing another key source of jobs and income. The island wants to limit imports of dirty and expensive fossil fuels and tap natural resources to supply as much clean and locally generated energy as possible.
fuel prices, because we live on an island, are very expensive. You know, you learn pretty quickly that you need an alternative.
Kodiak was the first place in Alaska to make wind power a substantial part of the energy mix, with its 3 1.5 megawatt turbines on Pillar Mountain.
So getting good quality, low-cost, sustainable power is really necessary for the long-term viability of the economy of Alaska.
Upgrades at the Terror Lake hydroelectric plant, plus plans for 3 more turbines, leave the KEA Co-op confident they can hit 95% renewables by 2020. Though Kodiak uses diesel as a backup and during repairs, the wind turbines save the island 800,000 gallons of expensive imported fuel each year. And this matters to the local business community.
This morning, we're offloading pink salmon and red salmon, chum salmon, and coho that came from the west side of Kodiak. It keeps us busy. The plants work 24 hours a day, and it's a very, very big industry for Kodiak.
This processing plant runs 100% on renewable energy, so Kodiak's wind power provides a clean, green marketing hook.
The package says, sustainable seafood produced in Kodiak, Alaska with wind-generated renewable energy.
You got some folks in the community that are really concerned about price. You know, they just want the lowest cost power at their house or their business. The wind does that. It's less than 50% of the cost of power versus diesel. Then you got folks in the town that are very just environmentally concerned, and they are incredibly excited because it's a whole lot cleaner than diesel is. And you got the majority of the folks that want both, which is great as well.
Kodiak is a genuine island, surrounded by ocean. But vast areas of interior Alaska are also islands of habitation, small communities surrounded by open country and dense forests. Many have no road access, and the only way to transport heavy fuel is via rivers like the Yukon. Bear Ketzler is city manager of Tanana, a remote and mainly native Alaskan village at the confluence of the Yukon and Tanana rivers.
90% of our bulk freight that comes in comes by the barge.
That includes diesel for the power plant and heating oil for homes. Diesel prices increased 83% between 2000 and 2005. And utility costs can sometimes be more than 1/3 of a household's income.
The increase of energy costs, it jeopardizes everything. It jeopardizes our school. It really jeopardizes the ability for the city to function effectively.
Communities like Tanana rely on the river for the fish protein that's a large part of a subsistence diet. And the river also provides a cheap and local source of energy.
We have abundant resources of wood, biomass, wood that floats down the river in the spring and the fall time.
Timber is increasingly replacing oil and diesel in Tanana's communal buildings, like the washateria, a combination laundromat, public showers, and water treatment plant.
But right now we don't even need oil. We're just running the whole place off of this one wood boiler, which is just amazing.
Using biomass and solar, the washateria now uses only 1/4 as much heating oil. Instead, the city pays residents to gather sustainable timber, keeping dollars in the local community. And using biomass at the washateria has proven so cost-effective that the city is planning to install boilers in other public buildings.
We're going to be one of the first communities on the Yukon River that is installing biomass systems on the school. In October of this year, we're hoping to have that wood system online. So instead of burning 15,000 gallons of oil throughout this winter, we're hoping to burn about 60 cords of wood and keep that money local and create a little bit of an economy here.
The bottom line for Tanana, savings for the city. Biomass is cheaper, local, cleaner, and more sustainable.
Even though we're a very rich state, very blessed to have the oil development that we do have, those days are diminishing. If we're going to make it in rural Alaska, we have to move towards renewable resources. I think we have, less than 10 years to move in that area.
Winter in Alaska presents extreme challenges. On this January day, it was close to minus 50. Gwen Holdman is an engineer with the University of Alaska's Center for Energy and Power. She and her husband also raise sled dogs, and both are mushers who have raced in the Iditarod. Today's run takes her past the Alaska Pipeline, which has transported more than 16 billion barrels of oil since it opened in 1977. Despite the fact that Alaska is rich in fossil fuels, Gwen knows they're limited and expensive. She wants to take advantage of every opportunity to tap renewable energy.
We are an isolated part of the world, and we are still dependent very much on imports, and so becoming more self-reliant on energy is still a real goal here.
Gwen was part of the team that built the first geothermal power plant in Alaska at Chena Hot Springs. Bernie Carl runs the Chena Resort and came up with the idea of creating an ice museum from the heat energy of the springs.
Now, you've heard of the Great Wall of China. This is the Great Wall of Chena. There's 800 tons of ice here.
Bernie is a real American pioneer, a showman, an entrepreneur, a tinkerer, an enthusiast for recycling old machinery because it's cheaper. He and Gwen successfully transformed the hot springs into a geothermal resource that now generates power from lower temperature water than anywhere else on Earth.
What you're looking at is something that's impossible. I went to the world's best manufacturer of geothermal equipment, and they said, can't be done. The word can't is not in my vocabulary.
It wasn't obvious at first that it could be done because these are low, really moderate temperatures for geothermal. The water that we're talking about here is about the same as a good hot cup of coffee, and generating power from that isn't a trivial thing.
Normal conditions for midwinter Chena are 3 to 4 feet of snow, sub-zero temperatures, and only a few hours of daylight. Heating and lighting costs were staggeringly high. But now, the resort runs year-round with over 90% of its electricity coming from the hot springs. Bernie's latest impossible idea is to use geothermal power to make the resort self-sufficient in food, even when it's minus 50 outside.
We have 85 kW of lights in here, high pressure sodium. We're changing it to 8.5 kW of LEDs. Now, this takes 1/10 the electricity.
For the past 6 years, Chena has hosted a renewable energy fair. One keynote speaker was U.S. Senator Lisa Murkowski.
I'm a Republican. Republicans, by definition, are seemingly more conservative. What is more conservative than harnessing what is available and around us in a long-term sustainable way? We have more renewable opportunities here in Alaska than any other place in the world. We've got incredible river systems. We have 33,000 miles of coastline, the power of the tides, the power of the currents. We have biomass potential that is just beyond belief. As diverse and as big and remote and as costly as things are in Alaska. If we can demonstrate that it can be done here, think about the hope that it provides. They'll look at us and say, wow, if Alaska can do it, we can do this. We can take control of our energy future.
But to have a sustainable energy future, we have to do things differently than in the past. Richard Alley explains.
We've been burning whatever was at hand for a long, long time.
As we see repeatedly with energy, you can burn too much of a good thing. And there are patterns in human use of energy. And if we're stupid enough to repeat them, burn all the fossil fuel remaining on the planet and put the CO2 into the air, we will cook our future. Take what we did to trees in North America, for example.
When the first settlers arrived on America's East Coast, the forests were so thick you could barely see the sky. That soon changed, and the forests almost completely disappeared as more and more trees were cut down to meet the heating, cooking, and building needs of a growing population. Making iron needed lots of furnaces, and the furnaces ran on charcoal made from trees. You can trace that history in telltale place names from my home state of Pennsylvania. So, farewell virgin forests, hello Pennsylvania furnace, Lucy Furnace, Harmony Forge, and Valley Forge of Revolutionary War fame. Large areas of forest were soon depleted, and charcoal making and iron production moved on to repeat the process elsewhere. Peak wood, meaning the time of maximum production, came as early as the first decades of the 19th century, or even before that, for some parts of the East Coast. The pattern of using up an energy resource until it was nearly gone was repeated at sea. As America's population grew, so did their need for a better way to light the night. So whaling crews went to sea on the hunt for the very best source of illumination.
Stand up and give it to him.
Whale oil. At first, large numbers of whales were found nearby. They could just be towed to shore. But by the 1870s, we'd burned so many whales to light our evenings that all the easy whales were gone. Whale oil prices roughly doubled. Now ships had to travel close to the poles in search of bowhead whales. Their oil wasn't as good, and conditions were really dangerous. In 1871, up in the Arctic, 33 ships were trapped in the ice and crushed. Just as happened with America's forests, we'd exploited the most easily accessible resources and hadn't stopped until we'd almost used them up. Lucky for us, in 1859, a cheaper and more abundant source of energy had been discovered, with Edwin Drake's successful oil well drilled in Titusville, Pennsylvania. And for 150 years, America ran and grew on oil and coal.
Today, in some ways, we're in danger of repeating the past. As the easy oil was all used up, we're drilling in challenging conditions up in the Arctic. We're considering an increasing reliance on tar sands, which are plentiful in our northern neighbor Canada, but which are dirtier to process. But once more, America has been fortunate to find a new, abundant, domestic, and potentially cleaner source of energy. Several regions, from North Dakota to the Mid-Atlantic and northeastern states, have large amounts of natural gas deep underground in shale rock formations. And the city of Fort Worth sits literally on top of the Barnett Shale. For the first time, a new source of energy is emerging when there's an awareness of the urgent need for sustainability. Can Fort Worth and America figure out how to make shale gas a significant part of our energy future without repeating the mistakes of our energy past? Folks used to call this Cowtown. Today, there are more than 2,000 gas wells right under the city of Fort Worth.
City's grown by 200,000 people in 10 years and estimated we'll gain another 200,000.
Rapid growth has brought congestion on the roads and pressure on freshwater resources at a time of record drought all across Texas. That has motivated the city to be part of the Sustainability Roundtable, bringing together developers and planners, energy executives, university researchers, and even the commander of the local Naval Air Station.
We have to begin to develop a master vision for how do we be sustainable. It has to be a concentrated effort on every department's part to think about their water use, their electric use.
Because it's working.
Roundtable members realize their push for sustainability is happening against the backdrop of the natural gas boom.
It's quite remarkable how rapidly shale gas has developed from being basically 0% of our production to being more than a third of our total natural gas production and going up.
Depending on how quickly we use it, experts say America could have enough gas for several decades. To some, this is a huge bonanza.
We found so much gas here and in other areas that the price has been driven down.
To others, shale gas is an environmental disaster waiting to happen.
There has to be a more robust discussion with the public about risk and risk-benefit. Very few discussions start that way. Most of them start with, here's a source we must use, or here's a source of energy we must not use. The real issue is, what is our desired end state?
Geologists have known about shale gas for more than 20 years, but that didn't mean the gas was easy or economical to extract. In this industry video, you can see that hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, uses a mixture of water, sand, and chemicals. This is injected deep underground to break up the rock and let the gas flow up to the surface more easily.
We say we've been punching holes in the ground in Texas for 100 years.
What was new was drilling down and then out horizontally, and the locations of the pad sites.
We've been fracking wells for 50, but we've not done it in your backyard.
Larry Brogdon is an oil and gas man who made money by acquiring and selling drilling rights. Now he teaches a course that touches on energy, economics, and environment at Texas Christian University.
The economic benefit to this area has been about, in the last 10 years, has been about over $65 billion.
And when natural gas is used to generate electricity, some estimates are that it's 50% cleaner than coal.
The advantage that natural gas has is that it's much lower carbon in terms of its footprint.
Industry insiders say Americans need to recognize that the power we all use has to come from somewhere.
Somebody goes over there and they flip on that light switch and they think they're just using electricity. Well, the natural gas is generating a whole lot of that electricity.
However, public concern, here in Fort Worth and nationally, has focused on worries that the entire cycle of drilling, fracking, production, and fluid disposal can contaminate drinking water, trigger earthquakes, and leak methane.
It is an industrial activity, and that means the management of water. That means air quality. And the third thing is just the community impact, that suddenly areas that were not being developed for natural gas now have this development coming in.
Daniel Yergin was a member of a special committee tasked by the U.S. Secretary of Energy to study the potential environmental impacts of natural gas drilling. The committee came up with 20 recommendations of best practices, with number 1 being better sharing of information with the public. Number 14, disclosure of fracking fluids. And number 11, studies about possible methane contamination of water supplies.
One has to do the full life cycle analysis, kind of cradle to grave kind of thing, to really understand where the points of vulnerability are, including full environmental costs, and to then weigh the risks and the benefits, and that will help us lay out what the panoply of sources would look like.
Only if safeguards are in place can this fossil fuel really serve as a bridge to a more sustainable future.
Right now, best practices would focus on things like how do you handle the water that is produced out of the well as a result of hydraulic fracturing, and making sure that it's disposed of in a very environmentally sound way.
As the name hydraulic fracturing implies, massive amounts of water are required for fracking. And in Texas, where water is a precious resource, this is a major concern.
Water's huge facing the city, and I think that water is one of those things that most people don't think long-term about.
Although Mayor Price says local breweries use more water than the drillers, with sustainability in mind, there's no reason why fracking has to use potable water.
So now we're able to use reclaimed water to frack these wells and thereby use less of our potable water. And it could take 3 million gallons of water to frack one well.
Once thought of as a sewage treatment plant, Village Creek is now the water reclamation facility. Till recently, 50% of Fort Worth's potable water was used for irrigation. Now the city's distributing treated gray water in distinctive purple pipes to irrigate golf courses and playing fields, and for industrial uses at the giant Dallas-Fort Worth Airport.
Every day in the city of Fort Worth, about 1 million people put water down the drain. This is where it ends up.
The water treatment process itself is becoming more sustainable and less energy intensive. And in a twist, this new approach relies on a truly natural gas. Methane is the primary component of natural gas, but it's also a byproduct of our daily lives, found in human waste. One of the first steps in the process is to remove solids from the waste and put it into digesters, where methane gas is generated.
Under normal circumstances, you may consider methane to be a greenhouse gas, which would be bad for the environment. But here, we're using it as a renewable resource to power our engines, possibly getting up to as much as 95% of the energy required for the operation of this facility.
Fort Worth is aiming for sustainable growth and an energy boom without a following bust. But the energy we all surely need will more easily be found by tapping another resource that's found in Fort Worth and every community.
When we talk about energy, we talk about the various major energy sources. You talk about oil, natural gas, coal, nuclear, increasingly also, of course, the renewables, wind and solar. But there's one fuel that gets left out of the discussion, and yet it's one that has enormous impact in the future. That's the fifth fuel: energy efficiency, conservation.
Kansas, a land of wheat and corn and cattle. In the heart of the country, it's number 48 out of all 50 states in energy efficiency. So this is a place where energy conservation can really make a difference.
Come on, girls!
Our region is a region of farmers. We are famously conservative, and we have talked from the beginning about putting the conserve back in conservative.
According to a study by the Natural Resources Defense Council, improvements in energy efficiency have the potential to deliver more than $700 billion in cost savings in the U.S. alone. But, they say, motivating consumers to take action is the key to unlocking this potential. And that was the aim of Nancy Jackson's Climate and Energy Project with its Take Charge Challenge.
Kansans are patriotic, Kansans are hardworking, Kansans are humble.
And Kansans are competitive.
You all are competing against Ottawa, Baldwin City, and Paola. So really, you gotta beat those guys, yes?
Do you want to help us beat Manhattan?
2011 was the second year for the Take Charge Challenge, a friendly competition among 16 communities arranged in 4 regional groups aiming to reduce their local energy use.
Some of the lowest cost, most effective ways that you can take ownership of your energy future is taking ownership of the efficiency and the conservation of your house or your business.
Ray Hammerlin's office used federal stimulus dollars to fund 4 prizes of $100,000 for each of the 4 regions in the competition. No. Just as important as the grand prize, $25,000 went to each community to fund local coordinators who took the lead in galvanizing grassroots efforts. Here's how the challenge worked in Iola.
The challenge started in January of this year and ends October 1st. You're required to have 3 community events. We're going to have a lot more than that.
Today, we are at the Fight the Energy Hog Festival.
I love the hog. He was just so ugly that he's cute. He represents energy hogs in your home. You would probably let him in, but you don't know the damage he's going to do.
Competing towns scored points by counting how many CFL bulbs and programmable thermostats were installed and how many professional home energy audits were done.
Our job as energy auditors, both for commercial buildings as well as residential buildings, is we're essentially detectives. What's happening here? Is there a great deal of air leakage? And we're finding that the majority of the houses that we're dealing with actually use a lot more energy than they need to.
In Lawrence, a house of worship did an energy audit, made changes, and got a pretty nice donation in its collection plate.
One part of the audit was to contact the power company. Well, during that process, we discovered they had been overcharging us. And so we got a check, a rebate check from them for $4,456.
Other changes start small, but add up.
We were a little bit worried at one point that the congregation would not accept the very bright white type lights. So as an experiment, we took one of these chandeliers and changed all the bulbs in it to the CFLs. And then we took the priest over here and we said, which one did we do? And he could not tell us. So that told us it was okay to do them all.
Changing lights, adding insulation, and upgrading windows paid off.
Even though it's an old building, we save 64% on the consumption of energy in this room.
Lighting makes up about 15% of a typical home's electricity bill. And lighting all of our residential and commercial buildings uses about 13% of the nation's total electricity. But changing out old bulbs is a lot easier than paying for audits and the energy enhancements they recommend. Here's where the 2011 Take Charge Challenge promised material assistance using stimulus funds.
It's a $500 audit that costs you $100. The rest of that $500 is covered under the Take Charge Challenge program through the Kansas Energy Office. We really love the competitive spirit of the program, and I think it's really raised the whole awareness of energy efficiency and the importance of energy efficiency to a lot of segments in our community here.
Even Baldwin City bankers were grateful for financial assistance from state and federal governments.
9 months ago, we installed a 14-kilowatt solar power system. I believe the initial cost of the system was basically $65,000, and then we got a substantial grant from USDA. I believe it was $20,000. We have about $18,000 of our own money invested in the system after all the deductions. We think it'll pay out in about 7 to 8 years.
David Crane of NRG Energy thinks that kind of approach makes good business sense.
What I say to every businessman who has a customer-facing business, think of a solar panel not only as a source of electricity, think of it as a billboard. You don't even have to write your name on it. Just put it on the top of your store and it will be sending a message to your customers that you're doing the right thing when it comes to sustainable energy.
Surveys of why conservation is hard to achieve have found that people want one-stop shopping, a place where they can find out what to do and get practical recommendations about who to hire and what it all might cost. Just what this new facility was to offer. Now, it's mid-October. Time for the results of the 2011 Take Charge Challenge.
Fort Scott, categories 1 and 2. And the winner is Baldwin City.
Over 100 billion BTUs were saved as a result of this challenge, and millions of dollars in each community. Those savings come from measures that have been installed that will guarantee those savings for years to come. So the savings are enormous over time.
$100,000 has a nice ring to it, and it's a nice cash award for a community of our size. Our challenge now is to continue on with energy efficiency and encourage our community to save.
One of our real goals was to help people to stop thinking about energy efficiency as the things they shouldn't do, as what not to do, and think about it instead as a tremendous opportunity to both save money in the near term and to make our electric system more resilient in the long term. So it's about what we can do, both individually and together. And for us, that feels like the real win.
The United States today is twice as energy efficient as it was in the 1970s. And I think we have the capability in the decades ahead to become twice as energy efficient again.
We believe this is something that can be done really anywhere with great success.
Baltimore, Maryland. According to one study, the air in Maryland is the 5th dirtiest in the nation. Are there ways for America's 21st largest city to cut emissions and save energy and money?
Baltimore is unique in that it has over 225 neighborhoods within the city limits.
Like Kansas, it's been using competition to jumpstart the process of sustainability.
Hey, Alice Ryan. Hi.
BNEC, the Baltimore Neighborhood Energy Challenge, used existing events like this anti-crime rally in the Park Heights neighborhood to let city residents know about opportunities to save energy and to share the top 10 things to do.
You're signing people up? We're willing to go and talk to anybody, anywhere, where we can get some FaceTime with people to talk about energy savings and conservation. And if it means going to an event talking about crime, I'll go to an event talking about crime. If it's about a neighborhood block party. We'll go to a neighborhood block party. We find people where we can get them. And the toilet tank bank and draft stopper gaskets as well. Okay? You're welcome.
In addition to sharing information, the Baltimore Challenge enlisted energy captains to canvass their own neighborhoods, taking the conservation message directly to homeowners.
Okay, and this side as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's something the Challenge's utility partners knew they couldn't do.
Okay, that's what's up. I'm on the B-Neck Challenge to play.
If somebody just comes to your door and asks you to sign a petition to help the environment, to reduce your energy use, or if you see a message even from the local utility about all these great things you can do, it's not enough.
This is my sister Tracy, Alice Kennedy from the Baltimore City Sustainability Commission.
Unique thing about BNEC is the fact that it builds on this neighbor-to-neighbor advocacy and communication for energy conservation. And it goes right down to the household level, you know, neighbors talking to each other across the yard.
What do you guys do to save energy at home?
You leave the lights on. You're doing a day, we turn the lights on.
Yeah.
If you're not looking at TV, you can turn the TV on. So the TV cannot watch itself. That's basically what we do.
To jumpstart energy savings, the Challenge has a bag of free stuff, including indoor-outdoor CFLs, just right for the porch lights so characteristic of Baltimore.
Try it. Yeah. Would you be interested in trying that? Oh, yes. You can get up there.
Yeah, well, he will.
Everyone's household budgets are shrinking right now, too. So I think if we all just can be wise about what we're doing, we're all going to save a little money. And
So you're all signed up?
I am. I think I have to give you my account number.
Yeah, do you mind?
The Challenge found that neighbor-to-neighbor sharing could be even more effective when the energy captains went inside homes to demonstrate quick and effective steps in a simplified peer-to-peer energy audit.
Then when you're not here or you're not using it, turn the power strip off.
For Baltimore residents, saving water also saves substantial dollars. And this simple bladder reduces the amount used in each and every flush. What impressed the organizers of the first year's challenge was that Park Heights, home to the Pimlico racetrack and one of the most underserved neighborhoods, saved the most energy, nearly 13%. The organizers said the main reason was the energy and enthusiasm of the Park Heights energy captains.
They actually saw those residents who participated there the largest benefit of any of the neighborhoods. To see this very grassroots effort take off and outperform any other neighborhood was really impressive.
The Park Heights captains were also successful in applying for follow-on funding to continue their conservation efforts. The announcement of the 2011 Community Energy Saving Grants brought out U.S. Senator Ben Cardin and Baltimore Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake.
Saving energy means lower utility costs, and after the heat wave we've had, I'm sure everyone is interested in lower utility costs. And the knowledge about energy savings is contagious.
Baltimore City itself took lessons from the challenge and started pitting city departments against each other in a competition to catch energy vampires around city buildings. Using their new grant, the Park Heights captains started planning a new outreach campaign using junior energy ambassadors to reach out to schools and others. With homeowners' permission, challenge staff could access utility bills and so track energy savings neighborhood by neighborhood.
So we actually are able to show that we have proven savings by looking at utility usage data and showing that some of these little actions in the home can help save money and save energy.
Bottom line, thanks in part to the challenge, Baltimore is on track to meet its goal of reducing carbon emissions and energy use 15% by 2015. And the utilities can cut back too.
As we reduce energy use and energy demand, what we're doing is we're eliminating the need for a new medium-sized power plant, particularly in hard economic times. This challenge helps build a sense of, I can accomplish something individually. I can impact my life in a very positive way.
Saving energy means a reduced strain on our power grid, lower utility costs, as well as reduced greenhouse gas emissions, which means for generations to come, we will have better air quality and a cleaner and more sustainable Baltimore.
Can what cities do locally really move the dial toward national sustainability? Portland, Oregon shows what's possible. 70% of all the oil consumed in America is used for transportation. But congestion wastes a huge amount, perhaps 16% of all the oil imported from the Persian Gulf.
Despite our best efforts, we're still taking 10% of the world's petroleum supply just to get back and forth to work every day.
Congressman Earl Blumenauer represents Oregon's 3rd District, including Portland. He heads up the Congressional Bike Caucus, and his city started finding solutions some 30 years back.
You know, one of the things we did was we have an urban growth boundary, and what that is sort of a ring around the city of Portland and its surrounding suburbs, so that we cannot kind of sprawl out and we can't become Los Angeles.
Between 1950 and 1990, America's urban population grew by 90%. But city's land area grew by more than 250%. Remarkably, Portland bucked that trend of urban sprawl.
Key decisions made include a move from investment in freeways into transit and also to integrate transit planning with land use planning.
Along with region-wide thinking, Portland now has an infrastructure that emphasizes mass transit, along with something this city pioneered in the 19th century. Bicycles. It may be easy to parody Portland's love affair with all things green, including the cycling community. But putting bikes to work has practical advantages if they can be made into something used for more than pure recreation. That's the purpose of what's called the Oregon Manifest, a design challenge to come up with clever and practical ways to transport packages as well as people.
A decade ago, it was hard to find a bike that was not a racing bike or a mountain bike or a touring bike. Now, any bike shop that you walk into in the city of Portland anyway, you'll find city bikes, bikes that are really made for commuting to and from work, from riding to the park to the grocery store.
Half of U.S. car trips cover less than 10 miles, and short trips, where engines make a cold start, are the most gasoline intensive and polluting. So if city bikes like these became mass-produced and popular, and if every one of the nation's more than 100 million households substituted one 5-mile trip each day, the nation would save $36.5 billion on gasoline. Already one young entrepreneur has put Portland's non-polluting pedal power to work and made a business of it.
We use these large tricycle trucks to deliver products into a 2-mile radius of the urban core for Portland. We deliver everything from bread and produce to office products to water to cycle parts. Each trike can carry about 800 pounds. They're all electric assisted, so it's a hybrid human and electric power.
The less congestion we have, our goods and services move faster. We're an international global city. We have to be scrappy. So bicyclists are about reducing congestion.
Over the past 2.5 years, we've helped displace over 25,000 truck or van-based deliveries, and we start to look at the overall greenhouse gas reduction and avoidance. Day by day, it's not very much, but cumulatively, it really starts to stack up.
Cycling may be an outward and very visible sign of a transition away from cars, but the region's mass transit network also has serious numbers.
We have been electrifying our transportation for 30 years here, and today there's literally about 150,000 boardings per day, and that means that people who otherwise might be traveling around in cars are traveling around in electrons.
As a result of how we put the pieces together in Portland over the last third of a century, Portlanders voluntarily drive 20% less than the national average. This translates into a dollar savings for the typical household of more than $2,500 a year. And that's money that stays in our community. It's not going to Houston or Saudi Arabia Japan, or Germany.
Portland's leaders talk about the trip not taken as something that saves money and benefits the environment. Currently, more than a quarter of Portland's workforce commutes by bike, carpool, or mass transit. But planners are working on the next giant step in low-carbon transportation, electric vehicles.
I think we get to the point where electric vehicles will be able to do 98% of the personal transportation needs, and of course that's mainly in the cities and the suburbs.
An average Portlander's daily commute of 20 miles could easily be powered by a single battery charge. So, Electric Avenue is a test site to get ground truth on how people might use e-vehicles.
We think the next 10 to 30 years is going to be focusing on individual passenger vehicles like the ones behind me, and also on urban freight and service vehicles, those parcel delivery trucks, the post office.
Those vehicles also make lots of short trips with starts and stops, producing emissions and using up a lot of fuel. Nationally, companies like Frito-Lay are competing with others like Federal Express to see who can deploy the most low-emission delivery vehicles.
Tailpipe emissions are the single greatest source of emissions in our major cities. So I think probably every mayor everywhere supports the idea of getting more vehicles on their local roads that don't have tailpipes.
Portland's original plans concentrated on land use and transportation. The focus for the future is the neighborhood. The goal is what's called a 20-minute neighborhood, with most everything a family needs in easy walking or biking distance, where kids can learn how to ride safely to and from school.
This effort of integrating the pedestrian, streetcar, bike, along with mixed-use development, it's enriching the experience of going to the store, going to visit a neighbor, and makes us a more sustainable, cost-effective community.
Portland's transportation innovations have direct economic benefits.
By actually doing the right things here, we've built this base of great export. We've got solar firms, wind firms, we have firms focused on energy efficiency with hundreds and hundreds of employees, and they're locating here or they grew up here because we were trying to do something and we built demand here.
So we're one of the cheapest cities on the West Coast because we offer options other than having to own a car to live and work and have a good life.
I think just like anything you're trying to do, whether it's a business or a government or a city, good things don't happen by accident. You need to have some good plans.
We can reduce that carbon footprint while we provide economic opportunities for our citizens and others.
Richard Alley agrees. Science and sustainability both come together in an operator's manual for America.
Like thousands of Portlanders, I commute by bike. Like many in Fort Worth, I've worked for an energy company. My university runs a herd of cows, so I connect with Kansans. I've spent time in some pretty cold places, so I know some of the challenges Alaska faces. And I appreciate the importance of affordable energy to everyone, including the citizens of Baltimore. So as we look around our planet with eyes informed by climate science and with an appreciation of the vast potential for clean, low-carbon sources of energy, I think we can be optimistic about our prospects while being realistic about how humans are affecting the planet. Our world is complex, like a giant jigsaw puzzle. But Earth science gives us an operator's manual to help us see where most of the pieces go.
Some things we know with really high confidence. Carbon dioxide levels are increasing in Earth's atmosphere, and basic physics and objective research show that CO2 warms things up. Analyzing the chemistry of the CO2 shows that most of the carbon is coming from our use of fossil fuel. Satellites looking down from space show that the atmosphere is warming down here, but cooling up here high in the stratosphere, showing that the warmth isn't from the sun. And we've got lots more solid knowledge that just about every climate scientist agrees on. Of course, there's some things we still don't know. We'd like to know more about clouds.
On balance, Do they work to make climate changes bigger or smaller?
And we'd like to know how weather extremes will change and how fast. Some things we simply can't know. When will the next big volcanic eruption spread cooling clouds of ash around the planet for a year or two? But even with these uncertainties, the big picture is pretty clear. But in a very real sense, the most important questions aren't about science and engineering, but society and policies. What do we want to do? And on that, surprisingly, there's a growing consensus across political parties, businesses, and community groups who are listening to the science and looking to the future.
Obviously, in some ways, there is a diversity of opinion about the degree to which man-made activities affect the climate. Now, I happen to be on the side of those who believe there is an effect. But suppose one were not, whether one's focus is on national security, geopolitical effect, or the environment. In the end, all of these things track in the same direction.
Yeah, everyone's always talking about the exceptionalism of the United States and global leadership and clear thought leadership culturally, socially, and I believe in all that. But if you believe in all that, you then can't turn around and say, well, we're helpless and we're just a little bit of the problem, and no matter what we do, China and India will go their own way. There's just no evidence that that's the case. If the United States leads in this way, others will follow. I mean, that's what leadership's about.
At the end of the day, the atmosphere doesn't care one whit what people think. The atmosphere cares what people do. We can reduce emissions in real time. Why people do it, as long as they do it, doesn't matter to us.
For all we know about the climate, for all the promise of renewables, perhaps even more important is figuring out how to unleash people power to energize our nation. That's what an operator's manual is all about. It tells us how something works and how to get the very best performance out of it. And I also have faith in how America's democracy works. We can make positive changes if we think clearly and move forward together. That's my hope. That's my faith. For Earth, the Operator's Manual, I'm Richard Alley.